Today's project is the closed form lidded box. So I have a pound of clay all worked up, ready to go. Just like all projects, they start the same with centering. So 3 times up and down, usually enough. This has got a little bit of a wobble in it, so we'll do one more time, just for good measure. All right, we're going to call that good. So I'll go ahead and open it up. Do the plunge first. Find our proper depth. And then I'm just going to move my finger to the right a little bit, forming the inside bottom of my pot. This closed form box, I want 2.5 or 3 inches inside bottom. I think I've got 2.5 inches here. So this top looks a little ragged right now. So just like I always say, go and fix that. If the top starts to get out of control, before you know it, you've got elephant ears or you've got thin spots and can get ugly fast. So this shape is an upright shape, so I am going to pull the clay back and inward on itself to prepare it for going up. Come back and heal that lip, compress it, straighten it up, whatever you want to say. All right, and now we're ready for our first pull. Again, the first pull is always mainly just getting the clay straightened up and headed in the right direction. So sometimes I say it's a suggestion, but it's really a preparatory move for what we're going to do next. Okay, a little bit more water. There's not really anything accumulating in the bottom yet, so I don't need to sop it up. Okay, we'll dig a little deeper this time and try to get some height out of it. All right, so this is interesting. There's a little bit of a thin spot in there, which is caused from poor wedging, I would say. And the top consequently has gotten a little bit uneven. This is not bad. It's really low-key flaws here, but it's worth mentioning that not every piece is perfect, and it's a matter of working with it and getting the shape you're after. And once things are decorated and glazed and so forth, things generally end up looking pretty good in the end. Okay, so we're going to do another pull, and I'm going to try to go as straight up as I can. Right here is the thin spot. Just going to go past that. All right, and so you can see the top is definitely wobbling. I'll have to decide how I want to deal with that, because this form is actually going to close in on itself. In Ceramics 1, we really don't yet learn how to make a fitted lid, but this is a way of making a pot that has a lid that fits well without actually having to learn how to size and fit the lid. So that's kind of cool. Now there is a little water down there, so I'm just sopping that up. And I'm feeling like I want to straighten these walls a little bit. This shape that I'm making today has a lot of detailed trimming that's done on it. So because of that, you really want the side walls to be nice and straight and even. And I can see that the side wall, you can see kind of just by comparing to the rib that it undulates in and out a little bit. So I'm going to use this rib to try to straighten things up and prepare it for what I'm going to do to it next. Right, so that actually has improved things. I like that. So we will go ahead and do, before we go any further with sculpting and details, we'll do this little pre-trim. And I can see that I did a little bit of weird something to the base here when I ribbed it, but it's fine. A little part sticking out at the base, but that will be fine. It'll go away. All right, so now we have a cylinder, and you know, thinking about the other projects, this is an awful lot like making a 4-inch cylinder. This is 4.5 inches tall. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to do an extreme form of collaring, which means that I am going to pick a starting point and start to collar this in, and I'm going to take it all the way until the two sides meet in the middle and the form is closed. It's going to have air trapped inside. So I think that this is also a good opportunity to talk about trimming the top when you've got an uneven top. So let's just look at how this top is. It's not horrible, but it's got a little bit of an up and down motion to it. And along with, when you see that, there may also be some thickness variations. So I'm going to just take my needle tool and gently insert it fairly close to the top. I'm trying to push this all the way through to meet my finger, and if I succeed in that, I should be able to lift this off just like a little calamari ring, and that goes in the scrap. And so now I'll let this spin a little faster. You can see the top is a lot straighter now, and that's going to be good preparation for going in. Okay, so collaring is 6-point collaring. I've got the tips of my middle fingers, I've got the knuckles of my ring fingers, and I've got my thumbs. And you can actually substitute out a lot of different fingers for this, but you want to get these fingers wet and then pick a starting point. I'm going to go at about 2/3 of the way up, and I'm just collaring in a little bit. Sometimes I like to pick up the wheel speed when I'm collaring. That seems to help. And so let me just remove my hands a second. You can see what I've started, and what I'm going to do is lift this all the way to the top. So I'm moving the clay inward, about 1/8 of an inch, something like that. So let's continue to collar this. And it's important when you are collaring in this way that you complete the motion. When right now the top, the very tip top of this, is threatening to fold in on itself. And so that it kind of always happens, but you have to just very slowly get past that and get all the way to the top so that you don't end up with a flare. If you've got a flare at this point, that's really bad. Now let's look at some other things that are going on with this. You can see that there might be some uneven or thin spots somewhere along in here. There's something that just went by. It's a little bit of a fold maybe. All that's going to be immaterial in the end because this is going to come in and meet at the center. So let's just continue. I'm going to start at about the same spot as last time and try to collar it a little bit more. All right, so far so good. Now, one thing that sometimes happens is this seems like it's a little thicker than I want it to be. And so if that is the case, you can actually do a little bit of a pull, and I'm going to do that right now. So first thing I'm going to do is kind of straighten up the top just a little bit. It's starting to look a little ragged. And then I'm actually going to try to pull from the point where I started the collar and just try to straighten out wrinkles and make sure that this really wants to come to closer to a feather edge at the top. You don't want this to be thick because you're trying to move all this clay, and if you can reduce the amount by a little bit, that helps in moving the clay. Okay, so we've started to collar at the 2/3 up point. We've got this moving in the right direction, and we just have to continue. So I'm going to again start from about the same point and collar it in just a little bit more and continue all the way up to the top. Now, up in this area, it really wants to fold on you. You can see any irregularity of any kind is going to manifest itself right at the top here. We may have to cut this off again, but I would rather not cut it off too many times. So instead, what I'm going to do is start a little bit taller, a little bit higher than the shoulder, and see if I can collar this a little bit more in. Okay, so it's folding in on itself a little bit, and it's getting very ragged looking, but that's fine. I'm going to continue to go. Right now, I have just over 1 inch in the opening right here, and it's going to close up. So we just have to continue with the collaring. So again, I'm going to start about midway up of what I started before, and just see if I can push that in a little bit more each time. So I said the last time it was at about 1 inch. Now maybe it's 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to go ahead and trim this off because it'll be easier to close up if I do. So it's the same kind of motion. You have to be very delicate with this because it's thin up here, and you can actually make things worse if you make the wrong kind of move. So just be real careful with it. You can see that it's nice and straight again, and I should be able to kind of jump to the middle in 1 or 2 more moves. So again, every time I repeat this, I'm starting a little bit higher up. So I'm going to start about here this time, and we will just collar that in. Now, I feel like I could have gone all the way, but just to illustrate the stepwise nature of this, I've got about 1/4 of an inch of a hole in there now. So that's great. It's almost ready for me to jump to the middle, and I think I can do that just right at the very top by using my fingertips, and there we go. It is now closed. So once it's closed, you can now use a lot of interesting tools on this. So I'm going to use a rubber rib. Let me get this wet just a little bit. And I'm going to come right down on the top, the very top, and just try to mash that down and make a flatter and a nice curve actually. But there were some wrinkles from this whole collaring process. And the point is you can really straighten that up, and you can really push on this a lot now because there's air trapped inside. So the rubber rib, that's pretty good. You can use a wooden rib on this. Actually, the best thing, and I don't like to use the metal ribs for very much, but I think this is a case where a metal rib might be the right tool. So let me grab a metal rib, and now we'll see what we can do with this. See, this is very flexible compared to even the rubber rib. So I'm going to take the leading, or the edge of it, and I'm going to put the edge right in the middle of my top and form a really nice curve on this now. Yeah, so that really improves things. Nicely shaped. I can even use this rib on the edge, although maybe that's not the best rib for that. I think my wooden rib is the best rib for that, for straightening up a pot. Okay, so this irregularity that I talked about at the bottom, see, that just went away when I ribbed. And I'm going to do this just a little bit more. I'm trying to push this combination of ribbing the top and ribbing the sides. I've missed a spot right here, and so I need to somehow dig a little deeper and catch that spot. And I think I can do that by ribbing from the top now. So we'll just try this again. Yeah, actually that fixed it. That's good. Okay, just want to make sure the top looks good. All right. So the next move is, what do I want to say about it? It seems very extreme. And so what we're trying to accomplish is you can see the lid. You have a lid on this pot, and you can see the body of the pot. We need to make a place where the two are going to separate. And I do that with the back of my needle tool. So what I want to do is make a groove. Of course, you never touch your pot unless it's moving, right? So I'm going to get the pot moving, and I'm going to make a groove at the point where I want to pull these two things apart. So I'm just going to pick a spot where I want, so below this is going to be the base, and above this is going to be the lid. So you can see the demarcation point now, but that's just the beginnings of a mark. I need to have a very deep groove, and it seems really extreme, but when you think about it, this groove needs to go in at least the thickness of the wall thickness of the pot, right? So that's something like 1/4 inch. And I like to take it even a little bit further. So it seems, like I said, it seems very extreme. You want to have the bottom of this groove be nice and flat and horizontal, and that can be corrected to some degree when you get to the trimming process. But if you don't make this groove deep enough now, you'll never be able to trim it right. So it always looks, to my eye, like I went too far, and it should, okay? So you've really got to push that in. What you've got to imagine is the inside surface of the lid has to fit over this flange. So that means where it starts turning up, it needs to turn up inside of the lid. So it's a long distance, and I'm just saying, we're not there yet, and so I've got to push even further than what you see now. Okay, I think that may be far enough. Yeah, I think so. It's a little bit uneven on one side, but I think that's to be expected. So there's some kind of rough material hanging off of that. Don't worry about that. That can be, that'll be taken care of in the trimming. The very last step for this part of this pot is you want to make a hole. So where you make the hole, you want to make a hole so that air can transfer in and out. If you leave a closed form without a hole in it, then you're going to get air pressure build up inside, and that's not good. It'll eventually distort the pot. So you want to make a little bit of an air hole, and it needs to be right at the very top of this piece. So I'm just going to push my needle tool, and you can spin it a little bit to kind of reduce the friction. But I want that to pierce through and go all the way in. Okay, so that's it. You've created an air hole. Now later on when we do the trimming, what we're going to do is we're going to take a knife, a very sharp knife, and we're going to cut all the way around the perimeter of this with a knife, but when it's leather hard, ready to trim. So once we cut the lid off, then we're going to have a lid in one hand and the base in another hand, and we've got a lot of careful trimming to do, and I'll show those steps later, okay? But for now, just want to spin this a little bit and see that it looks nice and square. It still looks good. So that's the end. All we have to do is wire it off, and I'm getting lazy today. I'm not picking these pieces off. I'm just wiring them off dry. But always remember to choke up on your wire so that you have the minimum amount of length that will just make it underneath the pot. Because it's really important that you not make the cut and have it, sometimes the wire will flex up a little bit and you'll end up cutting out the bottom of your pot. So you really want to keep this nice and tight between your thumbs as you go underneath that. And so that is the throwing part of the closed form lidded box. And there will be another part where we go through the trimming, which is quite detailed, and that I'll probably edit this all together. So thanks for watching this part. But I also want to go all the way around. So I'm going to use the larger tool just a little bit to establish a flat side or an edge, and then go back to the smaller tool for kind of some fine tuning on this thing. Now I've noticed that when I trim these pieces, you get little trim shavings that go down inside the lid, and if those are too wet, they'll sometimes just stick to the clay in there. So just be careful and pick them out, but that's something to contend with. So I think I need to go a little bit further with this. It's not quite opened up yet. Once again, the lid is all full of shavings. Just pick them out. And we're going to go back one more time, but I'm going to use the broader tool because I really want to make a nice straight edge. Okay, it's getting very close now. I switch back and forth between these trimming tools, just depending on what feels good in my hand. Have a lot of other trimming tools as well, some sharper ones like these. They're good, but I find I can do most everything with those two Kemper trimming tools. Just want to cut this a little bit more on the inside. When I pull this up to size it, if I need to do a little more, I'm going to have to get it centered again. So you don't want to do that too many times. So I'll get a little bit of shavings out of there, and then let's see about the size. Okay, so it's not quite going to fit down on there. I have an idea that I may have to take some more off of this. This looks pretty great. Before I go back to this, I'm gonna level this back and just try to take a little bit more out of the inside. It's very close. Okay, so I'm trying to make this opening just a little bit larger. So I'm going to use my larger style trimming tool, and I'm just going to try to shave a little bit off. This is another part that's nice if you can burnish it. So I'm just using my fingernail to burnish that a little bit. I think that I haven't really made it much larger, but I made it nice and smooth. So we'll test the fit. Still doesn't fit down on there, so I'm just going to set this off to the side a little bit. And I'm going to try to make this be a little bit further in. Sometimes you can do that very easily. I'm just going to take my thumbnail and see if I can bend that over a little bit. All right, now we'll see if that fits. Very close. So I can do just a little bit more on this. I'll do that before we go back to the other. So I want to make this a nice right angle if I can. Very subtle now. Not removing a lot of material. I'm just trying to fine tune the shape and the fit. Now we'll see if the lid fits on there. Okay, still not quite. I think I can go one more time on this. There's still, this is not really leaning over yet, and it can lean over a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut it a little bit. It seemed to move a little bit, so I'll just tighten it up. All right, this is getting very close. I think that this is not quite there yet, but it's very close. All right, it almost goes down. The finish on this is good. I like that finish. So I'm going to put the lid back on and try to open this ever so slightly. Have to level it again. Okay, so I need to widen this, but not by much. Oop, it moved on me a little bit. Let me just check. Okay, at a certain point with this, you can kind of force it down on there. Don't force it too much, but you can kind of push that down as long as you don't distort things or bend them out of shape. You can see that the lid fits pretty nicely now, and after this is bisque fired, if these are rotated on top of each other, that will be an almost perfect fit. So that is the task of trimming the closed form lidded box. And there's a little bit of stuff I want to touch up right here, but I'm going to go ahead and put my maker's mark and my number stamp on there.